just going to do a very quick overview of the process. Sorry, you just need to bear with me. The internet is being a little bit hesitant, so there's a little bit of a delay between slides. So yeah, before we get started into the application process, I just wanted to give a very short overview for those who maybe missed the session this morning and have just joined this afternoon. Local Energy Scotland is a consortium made up of the Changeworks, the Energy Agency, Energy Saving Trust and SCARTH, and together as Local Energy Scotland, we're responsible for delivering the Scottish Government's Community and Renewable Energy Scheme, otherwise known as CARES, and we'll be referring to it as CARES throughout this presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning there, my name's Graham and I'm one of the development officers here. We are all based regionally and cover a distinct geography. So I'm covering Northern Highlands, Western Isles, Skye, and also some other projects in other areas of Scotland as well. My colleague Rita, who is going to be co-presenting with me today, covers the North Isles and North East. I'll let Rita introduce herself when it comes to her section that she'll be presenting on. For anyone interested in finding out who your own local development officer is, you can find all our contact details on the localenergy.scot website. So before we go to discuss eligibility and the application process in more detail, I just wanted to give you a very brief overview of the current funding round. So with all our funding rounds, these tend to be aligned with Scottish Government priorities, which reflects the importance with which the Scottish Government places on community and local energy. So at the moment, the key focus of this funding round is decarbonising heating in buildings, and there's also an element there reducing energy costs and running costs of buildings, and other measures such as solar PV and battery storage are in there as well. This funding round is slightly different from previous funding rounds from Local Energy Scotland in that it's running until March 2025, whereas in previous years there's been quite a short application window. This one is done on a rolling basis, so it will be open for a long time, but as this is subject to funding availability, the sooner you get an application in, the more likely it is that it's going to be successful. So in terms of this fund, we have funding available to cover up to 80% of eligible project costs, up to a total maximum of £80,000. So what that does mean is there's an element of match funding required for any prospective applicants. So that will be 20% of the total project cost. And it's worth bearing in mind that you can't use other Scottish Government grant funding as match funding, but other grants it is possible to use them. So moving on, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Rita and let her introduce herself as well, and she's going to be discussing eligibility in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Graham, and welcome everyone. My name is Ruta Burbaite and I am the CARES Development Officer for the Northeast of Scotland and North Isles. And today I'm going to give you an overview of the Let's Do Net Zero Community Building Fund, its eligibility and technologies and measures covered. Okay, so first of all, I would like to talk you through our eligibility. So all our applicants must be constituted non-profit distributing community organizations, including organizations with charitable status that are established and operating across a geographically defined community or faith group. And some common community organizations organization structures include the Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organization, private companies limited by guarantee, community benefit societies, and community interest companies. Organizations that are constituted but unincorporated can also apply, but we will need to provide some additional information. For instance, we will need to demonstrate a minimum of 3 unrelated persons on the organization's management committee or board that are local to the area served by the community building, that the area of benefit is in Scotland, and a commitment to demonstrating the low carbon technologies in the building and raising awareness among building users and the wider community. This should also include raising awareness of support available through Home Energy Scotland to help people reduce their energy bills in their homes. The funding is available to support decarbonising self-managed community buildings, and eligible buildings include, but are not limited to, village halls, community centres, community hubs, sports facilities, and faith buildings. The building must be owned or leased by the applicant, and if you are a tenant, you must have a valid and valuable lease in place for at least a 35 years following the completion of the project, or have the right to extend for the equivalent period, but also evidence of permission from the building owners to carry out all proposed works. To be eligible, the community building must be used by the local community or charitable organization and have good levels of utilization. So applications must demonstrate via its constituting documents that anyone in the community can use the space, or that no one is explicitly excluded from being able to use the building, or the building is used by vulnerable or defined groups stated in the charity's objectives, for example, children, women, and refugees. We can help you with both the capital and installation and project development costs. So the capital and installation cost include the installation of various renewable energy technologies, energy efficiency measures, and battery storage. And the project development costs cover building warrants, planning permission, grid connection, and design and contractor appointment. Please bear in mind that we do not offer retrospective funding, so if you start any work now, we will not be able to cover the cost for it. So please speak to your local development officer for a further support. CARES funding is targeted at supporting communities to decarbonise their buildings, and to be eligible for our funding, the project needs to meet the heating requirement. So this means that the building will need to install a heat pump or a connection to a heat network, or will already have a heat pump, biomass boiler, connection to a heat network, all electric heating, including storage heaters, panel heaters, and electric boilers in place. And once you meet the heating requirement, then you can apply for our core or add-on measures. So you must apply for at least one core measure listed in the slide. So this includes a heat pump, a connection to a heat network, solar photovoltaic panels, and solar thermal hot water panels. And then you can apply for one or more add-on measures, such as energy storage, insulation, secondary glazing, draft proofing, LED lighting, and smart controls. Unfortunately, we do not offer any funding to various disruptive measures, such as internal or external wall insulation and double glazing. And please note that add-on measures must be a minority element of the overall funding requested. So we have a simple example to illustrate how it may work in practice. So the question is, our building is heated by electric storage heaters. We would like to install solar PV and replace lighting with LED light bulbs. Is this eligible for support? So we say yes, because you already meet the heating requirements. So the building is heated by electric storage heaters, and now you can apply for funding to install the solar panels as a core measure, and new LED lights as an add-on measure. Okay, does anyone have any immediate questions that I can or Graham answer just now?
And okay, so I'm now going to run through actually submitting an application and the various different steps that you're going to be going through as you do that process. So as Ruth has just been discussing, the first thing you want to work out is whether your building and the organisation that you're applying for is eligible for care support. So really easy, just to log on to the web, go onto our website. We've got a full few pages of funding guidance there. Got some FAQs, and you've got ourselves as local development officers. You can just drop us an email and we can triple check that for you if you're uncertain about anything. So this is our full list of local development officers here. Yeah, it's just a case of going on the website and finding who is local to you. Increasingly with remote work, we're starting to cover projects across Scotland as well. So in the case of myself, although I'm focused on Northern Highlands and Western Isles and Skye, do cover projects in other locations as well. So the first thing that you want to start having to think about really with an application is what measures you're actually intending to install. For some people, you might already have a good understanding of what's needed, what would be beneficial for you. For others, you might be less certain, or it might be a more complex project you're looking at. In terms of the application process, the Scottish Government panel want to see an illustration in the application of why the chosen measures are appropriate. So if you have an existing energy performance certificate or a recent Business Energy Scotland or Zero Waste Scotland report, these can be useful for highlighting what measures and interventions might be beneficial for your property, and are also a good way to evidence it. Because of the unprecedented demand at the moment, with regards to organisations and businesses accessing support, it is unfortunately at the moment it is taking longer than usual to access reports from Business Energy Scotland. With a lot of projects that we're involved in, particularly if it's post Second World War buildings, it's often quite straightforward for one of Local Energy Scotland's development officers to recommend what measures may be most beneficial. So the level of evidence required is really going to depend on your individual project circumstances. If it's a much more complex project, it may be a case of looking into getting some additional reports done. For a more straightforward community building, Local Energy Scotland will be able to advise in-house on what measures will be appropriate and what sort of evidence you should be including in your application. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. You'll have to bear with me as it's a little bit slow. Okay, so once you've determined what measures are going to be most suitable to install, it's then going to be a case of finding installers who can give you some quotes, as they're always best placed to give you an idea of project costs, and so to do that, if you're being funded through Local Energy Scotland, we require all installers to be MCS accredited. So that's the Micro Generation Certification Scheme. And what that does is essentially guarantees that it's going to be a high quality of workmanship done. That covers all the renewables technologies that will be funded under care. So whether that's air source heat pump, battery or solar PV. In terms of working out who it is who's MCS accredited and who's local to you, the Energy Saving Trust have a really useful tool on their mapping tool on their website. That's the link to it there, ref.est.org.uk. Just before I continue, could I just ask everyone to make sure your microphone's muted? We've just got a little bit of interference coming through. Thanks. So this mapping tool will give you, will just show you all the MCS accredited installers in your local area. You can also go on the MCS website and find them there. Usually with applications, we'd request that as part of the application submission, you include quotes from 3 separate installers. This is really to guarantee value for money on all the projects. For folk located in more remote areas, you may struggle to find 3 people local to you, or if you're in areas with particularly high demand, you may also struggle. So if you are struggling to find 3 separate quotes, please do make sure you get in touch with your local development officer, because we can look at putting through applications with less than that, as long as we can just justify why that's happening. So with additional add-on measures, so things like LEDs and light fittings and insulation, these aren't necessarily covered by the MCS certification scheme, so they should be being installed by contractors certified against PAS standards. And in terms of the LEDs and light fittings, these should be via a qualified electrician. For a lot of projects, it will be the MCS installer who is installing these, but for other projects, it may be that you have separate contractors installing some of these other measures. So as a final few things to run through in terms of what makes a strong application, it's really important in the application itself to identify any risks to the project delivery and completion, and include in that mitigation measures and how you're going to address it. Also very important to have a clear project timeline with clear measurable milestones in that. If you're successful and once your project begins, you will be working relatively closely with the local development officer through the process. So we look for monthly reports from organisations to check in on progress, and in terms of releasing the grant funds to you to do this, there are a number of conditions attached to those. So an example might be planning evidence of planning permission if that was needed for the project. So having those clear milestones in there makes that process of engaging with your local development officer much easier, much more straightforward, and stand your application in a stronger place. Especially for larger projects, demonstration of community support for the project can also really support an application. So that could be in the form of community surveys, minutes from meetings, from community meetings, or any other way really to demonstrate that there's support there for the work that you're intending to do. And as I've discussed previously, including all those quotes that you've managed to get is important, and just demonstrating that the project represents value for money for the Scottish Government, both with regards to decarbonisation and the wider benefits and the outcome as well. So we do have a lot of tools available, both on our website and in person in the form of your local development officer to help you through the process. Would recommend you to have a look at all the guidance and examples that we have available. So for instance, when you're going out to contact installers, we've got examples and guidance on that and the best way of approaching people. We've also got an example application form, and there's further information available through a previous community buildings funding webinar that is on YouTube there. As I've mentioned previously, we are going to make all these slides and the recording available, so you will have access to these links at a later point. So finally, before we just move on to some final questions, I've just got a contact page here for anyone who is looking to make contact either through directly through local development officers who I've mentioned, or there is also generic emails that you can get in touch with there. So I'm gonna now move us on to final questions